For more than 2,000 years, the ancestry of Cleopatra VII seemed like a settled question. She descended from Macedonian Greeks. Her family tree had been mapped. 12 generations of rulers before her, all traced back to one of Alexander the Great's most trusted generals. Case closed, or so historians believed. But when modern science finally reached into the ancient world to test these assumptions with actual DNA, it did not confirm the story. It dismantled it. Not because it proved Cleopatra was someone else, but because it proved that almost everything we used as evidence was built on a foundation of errors, misidentified bones, and gaps no one wanted to talk about. And the biggest gap of all sits right at the center of her family tree. Here is what DNA has actually revealed about Cleopatra's origins, and why the answer shocked even the experts who thought they already knew it. The Ptolemaic dynasty began in 305 BCE, when a Macedonian general named Ptolemy declared himself Pharaoh of Egypt. He was not Egyptian. He did not speak the language. He did not worship the local gods. What he did do was seize power after Alexander the Great's death and build a Greek-speaking royal family that would rule Egypt for the next 275 years. That dynasty, the longest and last to rule ancient Egypt, produced 14 pharaohs. Every single one was named Ptolemy. Every queen was named Cleopatra, Berenice, or Arsinoe. And to keep their bloodline pure, they married each other. Brother married sister, uncle married niece, cousin married cousin. This was not occasional. It was policy. Cleopatra VII herself married two of her own brothers, Ptolemy XIII and Ptolemy XIV. A normal person has 16 great-great-grandparents. Cleopatra had 6. The family tree does not branch outward. It folds in on itself, like a closed loop. So when scholars described her ancestry as Macedonian Greek, they had reason. The genealogical records, the ancient historians, the marriage patterns, all of it pointed to one conclusion. This was a Greek family, ruling from a Greek city, speaking Greek in their courts, maintaining their bloodline through ruthless intermarriage for nearly 3 centuries. The consensus felt like bedrock. But bedrock can have fractures, and the Ptolemaic genealogy has 2 of them, sitting in exactly the places that matter most. Cleopatra's mother has never been identified with certainty. The leading candidate is Cleopatra V, who may have been either a full sister or a half-sister to Cleopatra's father. But may have been is doing enormous work in that sentence. The ancient sources do not confirm it, and Cleopatra's grandmother on her father's side is also unknown. Ptolemy XII, Cleopatra's father, was the son of an unnamed woman, which is precisely why the Alexandrians of his own time called him Nothos, the bastard. 2 unknown women, 2 blank spaces on the family tree, and those blank spaces sit exactly where new blood could have entered the dynasty. As Cambridge classicist Mary Beard has said, the truth is that we simply do not know where Cleopatra's female ancestors came from. She was certainly of a royal Macedonian family, but whether her mother or any of her maternal forebears was Egyptian remains genuinely open. For decades, no one could resolve the question because the tools did not exist. You cannot determine ancestry from a coin portrait. You cannot read ethnicity from a marble bust. What you need is bone. What you need is DNA. And in 2009, the world thought it had exactly that. A BBC documentary announced a dramatic claim. Skeletal remains found in an elaborate tomb in Ephesus, Turkey, had been identified as Arsinoe IV, Cleopatra's younger half-sister. And the skull measurements, they said, suggested possible African ancestry. The implications were explosive. If Arsinoe carried African heritage, and she shared a father with Cleopatra, then the queen's ancestry was not purely Greek after all. The news ricocheted around the world. It launched 1,000 articles. It reshaped popular debate for over a decade. But the identification rested on a chain of assumptions so fragile that a single technological advance would snap every link. The tomb in question was the Octagon, a grand building on the main street of ancient Ephesus. Inside it, Austrian archaeologist Joseph Kiel had discovered a water-filled marble sarcophagus in 1929. He removed the skull, carried it back to his university, and left it with a yellowed note that simply read, "Skull from Ephesus." An anthropologist in 1953 examined the cranium and concluded it belonged to a female, roughly 16 to 17 years old. The Octagon's architecture resembled Egyptian royal buildings. Arsinoe IV had been murdered in Ephesus in 41 BCE on the orders of Mark Antony at Cleopatra's request. The age seemed right. The location seemed right. The story seemed right. And so, for nearly a century, the identification held. No one extracted DNA. No one ran modern imaging. The hypothesis became established fact through repetition, not verification. And when the 2009 documentary used 1920s skull measurements to argue for African ancestry, it was building a racial argument on top of an unproven identification, on top of century-old methods, layer upon layer of assumption. Before we see what modern science finally revealed about these remains, if you are finding this investigation as compelling as we think it is, subscribe so you do not miss future stories where the evidence rewrites what we thought we knew. In 2024, an interdisciplinary team led by anthropologist Gerhard Weber at the University of Vienna decided to do what no one had done properly before. They brought the Ephesus skull into the Vienna micro-CT lab and scanned it at a resolution of 80 micrometers, roughly the width of a human hair. Every suture line, every growth plate, every tooth root, captured in 3 dimensions. Then they extracted milligram samples from the skull base and inner ear, areas where ancient DNA survives best, and sent them through a mass spectrometer for radiocarbon dating and genetic sequencing. The radiocarbon results came back first. The remains dated to between 205 BCE and 36 BCE. That window overlaps perfectly with Arsinoe's death in 41 BCE. The chronology still worked. Then the genetic results arrived. Weber described the moment plainly. Then came the big surprise, he said. In repeated tests, the skull and femur both clearly showed the presence of a Y chromosome. In other words, a male. The remains did not belong to Arsinoe IV. They did not belong to any woman. They belonged to a boy, between 11 and 14 years old, who suffered from significant developmental disorders. His skull was asymmetrical, his jaw was severely underdeveloped, his cranial sutures had fused prematurely. He could barely chew. Genetic analysis traced his ancestry not to Egypt, not to Greece, not to Africa, but to the Italian peninsula, possibly Sardinia. He was, in all likelihood, a Roman child. The study, published in Scientific Reports in January 2025, did not merely correct a detail. It erased the only physical evidence that had ever been used to argue for non-Greek ancestry in Cleopatra's immediate family. Every documentary that cited the Ephesus skull, every article that built racial claims on its measurements, every argument that extrapolated from a sister's bones to a queen's heritage, all of it undone by a Y chromosome that no one had thought to look for in nearly 100 years. And here is what matters about this finding. First, the evidence shows that a century of skull-based identification was wrong, not because the methods were dishonest, but because they were incomplete. A 1950s anthropologist examining a cranium by eye could not detect chromosomal sex, could not read genetic ancestry, could not distinguish a Roman boy from a Ptolemaic princess. Second, the evidence rules out the only genetic link that had connected Cleopatra's family to any ancestry beyond Macedonian Greek. Without the Ephesus skeleton, no physical evidence for non-Greek Ptolemaic heritage exists. Third, and this is the part that leaves historians uneasy, The finding implies that we have been debating Cleopatra's ancestry for decades, using evidence that was never evidence at all. The entire argument was circular. The skull was Arsinoe because the tomb seemed Egyptian. The tomb was Arsinoe's because the skull seemed female. Neither premise was true. Meanwhile, a separate line of genetic research has been quietly redrawing the map of ancient Egyptian ancestry altogether, and it makes the Ephesus collapse even more significant. For decades, many scientists believed Egyptian mummy DNA was simply unrecoverable. The desert heat, the embalming chemicals, the humidity inside sealed tombs, all of it was thought to destroy genetic material beyond retrieval. The potential preservation of DNA has to be regarded with skepticism, said Johannes Krauss, a geneticist at the Max Planck Institute, before his own team proved the skeptics wrong. In 2017, Krauss and lead researcher Verena Schwinnemann published the first reliable ancient DNA study of Egyptian mummies in Nature Communications. They sequenced genetic material from 151 mummified individuals recovered from Abu Sir el-Malek, a burial site about 100 kilometers south of Cairo along the Nile. While soft tissue yielded almost nothing, the bones and teeth were full of genetic material. 90 mitochondrial genomes were recovered, along with 3 complete nuclear genomes spanning 1,300 years from the New Kingdom through the Ptolemaic era and into the Roman period. The results were striking. Ptolemaic-era Egyptians showed strong genetic affinity with populations from the Near East and the Levant, closely matching Neolithic and Bronze Age populations from Anatolia and Eastern Mediterranean Europe. Sub-Saharan African ancestry in the ancient samples averaged between 6 and 15%, considerably lower than in modern Egyptians, who carry approximately 8% more such ancestry today. Most importantly, the genetics of the community did not undergo any major shifts during the 1,300-year window the team studied. Foreign conquest, including Greek and Roman rule, left almost no detectable genetic imprint on the broader population. But here is the critical caveat. None of those mummies were royalty. No verified ancient DNA has ever been extracted from confirmed Ptolemaic royal remains. Cleopatra's body has never been found. Her tomb has never been located. Not a single Ptolemaic pharaoh has been positively identified through skeletal remains. The dynasty that ruled Egypt for nearly 3 centuries has left behind coins, statues, temples, entire cities, but not one confirmed royal body. This is not for lack of searching. Since 2005, archaeologist Kathleen Martinez, a Dominican criminal lawyer who traded courtrooms for excavation trenches, has been digging at Taposiris Magna, a temple complex 30 miles west of Alexandria. The site's name translates to Great Tomb of Osiris, the god of death and resurrection, and Martinez believed from the start that Cleopatra, who presented herself as a living incarnation of the goddess Isis, would have chosen exactly this kind of sacred ground for her eternal rest. Her team has uncovered more than 300 coins bearing Cleopatra's portrait, mummies covered in gold leaf, elite burials with golden tongues placed in their mouths, a ritual meant to let the dead speak in the afterlife. In 2022, they found a 1,300-meter tunnel carved 43 feet beneath the temple, heading straight toward the Mediterranean Sea. And in 2025, offshore surveys conducted with oceanographer Bob Ballard, the man who found the Titanic, revealed a massive sunken port, with stone buildings rising 6 meters from the seabed, polished floors, columns, and Ptolemaic-era pottery scattered across the ancient harbor floor. Martinez believes Cleopatra chose this site for her burial, that her body was carried through the tunnel and hidden beyond the reach of Roman desecration. Most mainstream Egyptologists disagree. Cambridge scholar Paul Cartledge maintains Cleopatra was buried in Alexandria's royal quarter, now submerged under 16 feet of water and further layers of sediment after a catastrophic earthquake and tsunami in 365 CE. Both sides acknowledge the same frustrating truth. Without the body, there is no DNA. Without DNA, the ancestry question remains unanswerable. The debate is real. Dwayne Roller of Ohio State University has proposed that Cleopatra's mother may have come from the Egyptian priestly family of Ptah, located in Memphis, which would make the queen partly Egyptian. Others point to the Seleucid intermarriages that introduced Persian and Sogdian ancestry into the Ptolemaic line through Cleopatra I of Syria several generations earlier. Still others argue that the extreme inbreeding of the dynasty means her ancestry was overwhelmingly Macedonian, no matter who her mother was, because the non-Greek contribution, if any, would be a single branch in a family tree that folded relentlessly back on itself. Each position is plausible. None can be confirmed. Today, somewhere beneath the sands of Western Egypt or the dark waters of the Mediterranean, the remains of the most famous queen in history lie unrecovered. We can sequence the genome of an anonymous mummy buried 3,000 years ago in a provincial cemetery 100 kilometers south of Cairo. We can identify the ancestry of an unknown boy entombed in a Turkish monument and determine that he came from Sardinia. We can read the genetic story of an entire community across 13 centuries and conclude that foreign conquest barely touched their DNA. But the one woman whose origins have launched more arguments, more documentaries, more cultural battles than perhaps any other figure in antiquity remains genetically invisible. 2,000 years of history, 275 years of dynasty, and not a single confirmed Ptolemaic royal skeleton to test. If you found this investigation into the hidden gaps of ancient history compelling, subscribe to explore more stories the evidence is only now revealing. Her coins survive, her temples survive, her legend, shaped more by Roman propaganda than by Egyptian memory, has survived for 2 millennia. What has not survived is the one thing that could settle the question: her bones. So here is what we are left with. DNA has not told us who Cleopatra was. It has told us, with devastating clarity, who she was not. And every assumption we built in her absence was never as solid as we believed. If we do find her tomb, and if viable DNA can be extracted after 2,000 years in the Egyptian climate, what do you think it will reveal? A queen who was purely Greek, or the first hard evidence that the dynasty's carefully guarded bloodline had been quietly broken all along?